what had happened and teaching the younger people to apply those lessons to today. In practice, what that meant was somewhat complicated. In the beginning, ARSP sent volunteers to Western European countries. It was the time of the Cold War, and it wasn't possible to send them to many of the places that the founders originally wanted to in Eastern Europe. But starting in 1961, our volunteers did arrive for the first time in Israel. And we've had a continuously operating program there ever since. And they've played, I think, a very important role in much of the reconciliation that has happened between Germany and Israel since that time. In 1968, the first ARSP volunteers arrived here in the United States. And here we came at sort of in a fairly unique situation at the invitation of a group of pacifist churches, often called the peace churches, the Mennonites, the Quakers, the UCC, and the Brethren. And these were churches that had volunteers already in Germany and have been working with our organization in Germany for some time. And they said, you know, we're committed to many of the same issues. And this, in 1968, included working for the peace movement, working to apply the lessons of war to a broader set of social justice issues. And so they said, why don't you send your volunteers to the United States and they can work with us in our programs? And so we did. But very quickly, we established ourselves as a separate program here. Initially also working primarily in the fields of social justice. If you talk to our volunteers from the 1970s, you talk to people who were very political, who worked for the United Farm Workers, who worked for community organizers all across the country. I have very fond memories of that. We didn't work with the Jewish community very much, despite the fact that we had been in Israel already since 1961. There was, I think, in the American Jewish community a different dynamic than there was in Israel. A deep suspicion of Germany that didn't make our mission really welcome. And it wasn't until the mid-1980s that that began to change. Our first project in the Jewish community, Project Ezra, they're still a project with us in New York, serves elderly Jewish people on the Lower East Side. And many of those individuals are survivors of the Holocaust. And in the mid-80s, they had a lengthy debate because they weren't sure whether they wanted young German volunteers working with survivors. They weren't sure how that would be received, whether that would cause the reliving of trauma. And after much contemplation, they extended an invitation to us on a trial basis. And that began a very fruitful and a very important relationship for our program here in the United States. Since that time, more than half of our volunteers now work with organizations connected to the Jewish community. We have approximately 24 volunteers right now in the United States. We have approximately 180 volunteers worldwide. I say worldwide, Europe, Israel, and the United States. And our volunteers, about approximately 7 or 8 of them, work with Holocaust survivors or in the field of Holocaust remembrance, a very important part of our work. But we also work with other excluded groups, and the issues of social justice more generally as a lesson to be taken from a National Socialist period of German history remains very core to our mission. So many of our volunteers also work with the homeless, they work with disadvantaged youth, they work with immigrants, with gay and lesbian groups, with women's organizations, with peace organizations and human rights groups. They work with the elderly in various capacities. And it's a very interesting program, I think. It's a very unique program. One of the things as an American that drew me to it, I think, is because I see in our volunteers people who confront their history in a very direct way. It's a very complicated history. And I guess I really believe that we all have a history. And there's something that we as Americans can also learn from that. If you just look at the papers today, you see things that are happening that reflect our own history that we have not fully confronted. And so, I think one of the great joys that I have in working with our volunteers is to watch that process unfold with young Germans and to see what I can learn from that for myself. It's not always an easy process. It's almost 70 years since the war ended. and we're 3 generations later. And many people ask, well, what is the connection with today's younger generations with this topic of the Holocaust, of National Socialism, and the damage that was done? And I think the relationship of every generation changes. I think that's just the way that things are going to be. But what impresses me so much is how very much alive it is in conversation in Germany today. We just recently had our weekend retreat. Our volunteers arrive in September and they stay for a year, serving with American nonprofits. The first retreat that we had is 3 months after arrival, and we just completed that this weekend. One of the things we asked them to do is explore their own family biographies. And for some, I mean, that doesn't bring much. Oftentimes, grandparents don't deliver the information about what happened in previous generations. But sometimes it can be extremely moving. We had one volunteer who made the realization that a member of her family was a major SS person who was very deeply involved with the concentration camps. And that realization was something deeply disturbing to her. And I think it also helped shape her sense of service in what she's doing today. At the same time, Germany is a different place than it used to be. It's a society of immigrants, and not all of our volunteers come from a traditional German background. Many of them come from a Turkish, an Arab, and many of them are Jewish. And this year we have 2 young Jewish volunteers, one of whom grew up very much in Berlin's Jewish community of today and is working with Holocaust survivors in New York. And I think in the conversations that we have with each other and in the conversation and the dialogue that they have with the people that they meet here in the United States, there's an enormous amount of learning that takes place. So I think that's pretty much what I want to say about the program right now. I'd be happy to answer questions later on as well. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce 2 current volunteers. Andra Meinen is from a very small town in northern Germany and has come to Chicago to work at Self-Help Home for the Aged, a Jewish home for the elderly founded by and for Holocaust survivors. And Vincent Falaska comes to us from almost as far away as you can get from where Andra comes from, and still being in Germany, the southwestern corner near Freiburg. And he is serving at the Illinois Holocaust Center, Museum and Education Center, excuse me, and in Skokie. And we've had placements in both of those institutions now since the 1990s, so we've been here for quite some time. So Andra, maybe you want to talk a little bit about yourself, what brought you here, and what you're doing.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Andra Mein. I'm from the Northern Sea. You can see a great picture from that with the light tower. So it's, compared to Chicago, very small and calm, and so it's now I'm here. So I work in the Self-Help Home for the Aged, and I'm there as an assistant from Fern Schaefer, who's responsible for all the activities. So I support her. I help her, help the residents to doing exercise in the morning, like I'm sitting there and doing sports and they have to repeat it. I try to motivate the residents to go to their events. So we have concerts and lectures and show movies. One important part is the friendly visiting. So I go to their apartments and talk to them, drink coffee, drink tea, eat cake, just talking about whatever, about history, and mostly they want to know what happened in my life, and they just want to get some information. And I help them if they have any small, hang up a picture, or they always keep me busy with small things, and it's it sounds silly, but I think they really enjoy that someone young is in there to bring in life and a little bit fun sometimes, just to jump around or do anything which make them happy. And I live in self-help, so they give me an apartment to stay there. Sometimes they knock on my door at night, but it's no problem because they understand. Some of them understand that I'm off, and so it's. But if it's only a small thing, of course I get up and help them whatever they need.
What inspired you to do service with ARSP?
My brother was 7 years ago with ARSP in New York City in the Home for the Aged 2. I had the feeling that he really grew in his work, what he was doing, and he was very satisfied with the organization. And he came back and he was different, but in a positive way. So I thought it's a good idea to do it too. After school, I thought I'm too young, so I'm already a nurse, and I thought, let's go. Why not? Now is the time.
All right, Vincent. Now, poor Vincent was just told moments ago that he was going to be up here talking, so I'm sure he's fully prepared.
Yes, of course. My name is Vincent Falaska. As Mark already said, I'm from the very southwest part of Germany. I also want to start like Andra. Back there you can see a picture of the Black Forest. It's called Schwarzwald. That's very close to my house, my home. Freiburg is right next to the French border and to the Swiss border. So right next to Strasbourg and Zurich, so you can bike there basically, and it's very nice to grow up with another culture and another language right next to your house, and I think that was really important for me in my youth. So I went to the German-French high school, and I graduated this year. I'm 19 years old, and I wanted to do a gap year between high school and college because I did not feel very well prepared for college and then directly a job or something, and I wanted to do something different. So I had nobody like Andra had her brother to show her what ARSP is. So I searched on the internet to find an organization that deals with the German past, because I'm really interested in history, and to touch also the Jewish life nowadays. And so I wondered if I want to go to Israel or to the US, because the biggest Jewish community outside of Israel is in the United States. And I found Action Reconciliation Service for Peace, and I was really interested because it's not only an organization that deals with the German past, but also a very political party organization, as Mark said. And I wanted to confront myself with the German past, with my own family's history, because I think a lot of Germans do not want to confront them, because I think it's so far away. But actually, I think it's pretty close. It's my grandparents' generation, and I think that's really important for myself. But I also wanted to go to a really big city. I wanted to learn another language, and I wanted to see how the American culture is, because everybody speaks and talks about America, but I think it's really different than it seems to be in the German news. So I was really interested. I just came from work from the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie. It's the third biggest Holocaust museum in the world, after the Yad Vashem in Jerusalem and the Holocaust Museum in Washington. My job there is, on one side, to be in the museum and to take care of the field trips every day. There are about 60,000 visitors every year, and 90% of the visitors come with school trips or with senior trips or other group trips. So it's a very big part for the museum, and I try to make the field trips as smooth as possible, so to check them in and everything. I'm also very in touch with the Holocaust survivors. We call them speakers, because in the end of every field trip there is a speaker giving a little speech about her or his life, about the background, how they survived the Holocaust. And that is really the part I like most, because you get in touch with so many stories, life stories that are amazing and really interesting, but also really terrible. And the other part is of my work is in the office.